You should always keep your cutting tools sharp, and we all know your chainsaws get their fair share of action. But before you can carve up the wood, you've also got to make sure the bar rails that the chain rides on are also properly maintained. As the guide bar wears, burrs may form on the outer edges of the rails where most of the cutting is done. It's important to inspect and maintain the guide bar, especially prior to mounting the bar and chain to the saw. Under typical cutting conditions, if bars and chains are maintained properly, you should be able to use approximately 4 chains before having to replace a bar. To extend the life of your guide bar, you need to do a few things. Clean the oil inlet holes and the bar groove. Inspect the bar rails for damages and burrs, deburr if necessary. And don't forget to rotate the guide bar when mounting during bar maintenance to ensure the wear is even on top and bottom. And last but not least, using premium bar and chain oil can extend the life of your guide bar. Now it's time to sink our teeth into the chain. We all know that a dull chain doesn't cut well, and in addition to being less efficient, it lowers the cutting speed. It intensifies the wear on the chain, guide bar, drive components, and internal engine components. It wastes fuel or your battery. It adds more physical stress for those trying to cut with it. Plus, it increases the possibility of a kickback. There are a few telltale signs that you need to sharpen your chain. First, chip size. A dull chain produces very fine wood chips, or even worse, flour-like dust. Another sign is if you've accidentally run the chain into the dirt or you've been cutting dirty wood. You may notice the cut sweeping to the right or to the left instead of straight. Lastly, the productivity seems off, you may have a dull chain. All right, so you've got a dull chain. What's next? If your chain is dull from use, each cutter just needs a couple strokes to regain its edge, which can easily be done in the field. If you're filing in the field, the stump vise will make it a whole lot easier. If the cutters are damaged from hitting a rock or dirt, it'll take a lot more time and effort, and you'll probably want to do that in a workshop, so having extra chains is helpful. There are a few ways to sharpen your chain, but we're going to walk you through using a combination roller filing guide. Place the guide on the chain, make sure the arrows on the guide point in the chain's direction of rotation. Also, make sure the gauge has snug contact with the chain. Just so you know, there are a few different guides designed for different chain types, so be sure you're using the correct one. 2 things to note. It's important to keep all the cutters and angles at the same length. Otherwise, you may get irregularities or curved cuts. When your chain has 4 millimeters left of the cutter's top plate remaining or has visible cracks, it's time to say adios and replace the chain. But for this, let's say your chain is still usable but dull. The cutter must be sharpened according to specific angles, which vary depending on the type of chain you have and the sharpening method you use. Different chain sizes require different file diameters. The smaller the cutter, the smaller the file diameter. We also recommend using a Husqvarna file holder for safety and to ensure ergonomic grip with full control over your file. Most chains have a witness mark on the cutter's top plate, which highlights the appropriate filing angle and the end of chain life. A 30 to 35 degree angle fits most Husqvarna chains. When using a round file, the file height sets the hook. Keep around 20% or 1/5 of the file above the cutter's plate. If the chain is filed too low, it will create hook. It will be grabby and not stay sharp for long. If you file too high, it will create back slope. That will reduce the chain's cutting efficiency and lead to more wear on the chain and bar. Regardless of the sharpening method, you'll need to adjust the depth gauge setting. Quite simply, the depth gauge regulates the chip thickness or the bite. Filing back the cutter reduces the distance from the depth gauge and the top plate edge. You'll need a depth gauge tool fitting your chain to control the setting. Chains sharpened without severe damage could handle 2 to 3 sharpenings before needing a major adjustment. The depth gauge settings vary by chain and application, but we recommend 0.65 and 0.8 millimeters or 25 thousandths and 30 thousandths of an inch, depending on the type of wood you're cutting for most Husqvarna chains. When you use a Husqvarna combination roller file guide, you don't have to worry about the angles. Just make sure the guide fits your chain and follow the instructions. The guide allows you to adjust the filing and includes a built-in depth gauge tool. It's also small enough to fit in your pocket. The SharpForce guide is becoming more and more common because it's not only the easiest to use, but it also files both cutting edge and depth gauge simultaneously. And if you've made it this far in the video, you obviously care about your saw. Another way to extend the life of your bars and chains is by using premium bar and chain oil like our X-Guard. All right, you're ready to rock, or should we say, ready to sharpen. Until next time.